I had been waking up every morning for 6 years and swinging my legs over the side of the bed and waiting to find out how bad it would be today. Some mornings the pain in my knees was a low ache I could breathe through. Other mornings it traveled up through the hip, into the lower back, settling in like a stone that had no intention of moving. My husband Robert would hear me get up and ask from across the bed if I was all right. I always said yes. I was not always all right. By the time I was 65, I had started rearranging my whole life around the pain, without telling myself that was what I was doing. I stopped walking to the mailbox in the afternoon. I started sitting down to do dishes. I held the car door longer than I needed to when I got out, steadying myself, hoping no one was watching. You learn to hide these things. You learn to give things up so quietly that you stop seeing what is gone. Then one morning, my granddaughter Clara, she was 11 years old, reached out and took my hand to help me down the porch steps. She did not say a word. She just reached out her hand the way you would for someone much older, someone who needed it. I stood on that bottom step for a long time after she had run off to the yard. She had already started thinking of me as someone who needed help. I had not thought of myself as that yet. She had. That was the morning I stopped accepting it. Before I say another word, drop your name and your age and the town you are watching from in the comments below. I read every single one. I want to know who is here with me today. Now, there are 7 snacks and foods I stopped eating entirely, not because someone told me to, because I found out what they were doing inside me that no one had thought to explain. I will tell you all 7. And at the very end, I will tell you the one thing I discovered that no doctor ever brought up. The thing that surprised me more than any food ever could. Stay with me. My name is Margaret Ann, and I am 89 years old. And I want to talk to you the way I would talk to my own sister if she was still with us. The first thing I gave up was anything made with white flour. I want to tell you about Sunday dinner first, before I tell you anything else about this. For 40 years, I made pasta on Sunday nights because Robert loved it. He would come in from outside and smell it, and his whole face would change. That pasta was not just food. It was the center of the week. Giving it up felt like dismantling something I had built, one Sunday at a time for 4 decades. But here is what white flour is doing inside your body. And I want you to hear this plainly, because when the doctor said it to me, the words went past me. White flour behaves like sugar the moment your body starts breaking it down. Your blood sugar spikes fast and then drops. And every time that happens, your body floods itself with something called inflammatory markers. Big phrase. What it means is your body goes into a mild state of alarm, over and over, every meal, every day, for years. And that alarm state is what feeds joint pain. It is the kindling under the fire. You cannot put a fire out while you keep piling on the kindling. Within 6 weeks of giving up white flour, my morning knee pain had dropped by more than half. Not gone, but half. I remember the morning I noticed it. I sat up in bed and waited for the stone in my hip, and it was not as heavy as it had been the day before. I sat there in the quiet for a moment, and I thought, something is changing. The second thing was processed vegetable oils, canola oil, corn oil, the generic cooking oil in a jug under the sink. I want to tell you about a woman named Vera first. She lived 2 houses down from me for 22 years. She cooked everything in that same oil, the same jug, the same brand. And she used to say she did not understand why her knees swelled the way they did in the evenings, why she was fine in the morning and stiff by supper. I did not know either at the time. I found out later. Those oils go through a process to make them shelf-stable that changes their structure in a way your body reads as damage. When those damaged fats move through your body, they set off inflammation in the lining inside your joints, the cushioning, the tissue that is supposed to protect the bone. Your body tries to repair it. The repair process is inflamed, and that inflammation is what you feel as pain. I switched to extra virgin olive oil and a little real butter. Nothing else changed that week. 3 weeks later, I stood up from my kitchen chair one morning, and something was different. It is hard to describe exactly, but the inside of my hip joint felt less like it was grinding against itself, and more like it had room to move, like something had been quietly let out. The third thing was sugar, all of it, not reduced, gone. I had a sweet tooth my whole life, and I am not going to pretend that was easy. I baked on Sundays. I kept a small dish of wrapped candies on the kitchen counter for 50 years because my mother did, and her mother before her. Giving up that candy dish was harder than I expected it to be. It felt like something leaving the kitchen that had always been there. But here is what sugar does to your joints specifically. It binds to the proteins in your cartilage, the cushioning between your bones, and makes those proteins stiff and brittle over time. The cartilage that is supposed to flex and protect starts to harden. The medical word for this is glycation. What it means in plain language is that every time you eat sugar, it is slowly stiffening the cushions in your joints, the way heat stiffens a rubber band until it snaps. And a stiff cushion is a damaged cushion, and a damaged cushion is pain. The first 2 weeks without sugar were hard. There is no softer way to say it. But around week 3, something settled and the craving went quiet. And by week 8, my knees had loosened in a way they had not in years. And on top of that, and this surprised me, I slept through the night for the first time in 11 years. Not just the joints, everything in my body seemed to exhale. The fourth thing was anything out of a can with more than 3 ingredients on the label. I want to tell you about an afternoon that I still think about. My neighbor Dorothy came over and sat at my kitchen table while I was making a pot of broth from scratch. Real bones, real vegetables, everything going low and slow on the stove. She sat down and she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "This house smells like my grandmother's house." We had not thought about Dorothy's grandmother in 20 years. We sat there for an hour talking about women who cooked from scratch because there was no other way. Women who never had a can opener in the house. Women who knew every ingredient because they had put every ingredient in themselves. I have never resented the extra time since. And I think about Dorothy saying that sometimes, about her grandmother's house. And I wonder who said it to her grandmother once. And I hope someone is sitting in a kitchen somewhere right now, having that same hour. That hour is gone and I cannot get it back. But I am glad I was in it. Most preserved and packaged food is loaded with sodium and additives that your kidneys have to work to clear. When your kidneys are under that kind of strain, they pull fluid in ways that increase the swelling around already inflamed joints. You eat a can of soup for lunch on Tuesday, and your knees are louder on Thursday, and you never connect the two. I did not for years. Now I am going to hold that last piece until the end. I promised you something bigger than any of this, and I have not forgotten. The fifth thing was red meat more than once a week. I was raised on red meat. My father ranched. The idea that a steak could be doing damage felt like an accusation against everything I grew up with. And I want to be clear, this is not about red meat being bad. It is about frequency. Red meat contains a compound that at high levels your body converts into inflammatory molecules. Once a week, your body handles it easily. 5 times a week, the load builds faster than your body can handle it. Your joints feel it before anything else does. I did not give up red meat. I gave up the habit of it. I moved it to Sunday and treated it like a real occasion. A good cut, cooked properly, eaten slowly. Robert thought this was wonderful. He started looking forward to Sunday dinner the way he had when we were first married. We had not done that in a long time. The sixth thing was alcohol. Even the glass of red wine I had been told was good for me. I want to say this carefully because I know it lands differently for different people, and I am not here to tell anyone what their life should look like. But alcohol breaks down in your body into compounds that get in the way of your liver doing the work of clearing inflammation. And if your liver is busy processing what you drank, it is not doing the job your joints needed to do. The pain gets louder. Everything gets harder to settle. I gave it up entirely at 71. Within a month, my joints felt less raw, less sharp in the cold, less tender when I pressed on them. My sleep got quieter again, and my hands, which had started aching in the mornings, went still. I had not expected the hands. I did not know they were part of it. The seventh thing was anything fried. French fries, fried chicken, the donuts at the church social that I had eaten every third Sunday for 30 years. When food is fried at high temperatures, especially in those processed vegetable oils, it produces compounds that lodge in your joint cartilage specifically, because cartilage has limited blood supply and cannot flush waste out the way other tissue can. These compounds build up. They make the cartilage stiffer. They make the inflammation louder. People with joint pain often feel worse in the days after eating fried food and never trace it back. I gave up fried food at 72. It took 3 full months to feel the difference, longer than anything else on this list. But when it came, it was not a small thing. One morning in October, I walked a mile without stopping, without adjusting my pace, without planning where I would rest. I came home and I sat down at the kitchen table and I cried, not from pain. I cried because there was no pain. 3 months is what it took to get to that morning. And that morning was worth every one of those months. Now I am going to tell you what I promised you at the beginning. The thing that connected all of it that no doctor ever brought up. The thing that when I found it surprised me more than any food on this list. I was 74 years old when my daughter brought me to a community center event on a Thursday afternoon because she did not want me sitting alone in the house. I went because I did not have the energy to argue. I sat in the back row expecting nothing. A woman stood at the front of the room. Her name was Helen. She was 80 years old, and she stood without holding anything, moved without hesitation. And when she turned to write on the board, her back was straight in a way that stopped me. I leaned over to my daughter and said, "What is she doing that I am not doing?" After the event, I found Helen and I asked her directly. She sat down with me for a long time that evening. She said she had felt exactly what I was feeling until her late 60s. She had made the same food changes, felt the same things shift. And then she said, "But the food is only part of it." I looked at her. She said, "The body is downstream from the mind." She explained it this way. She said that your body generates inflammation in response to two things: what you eat, which we have been talking about, and cortisol. Cortisol is what your body makes when you are scared or grieving or carrying anger for a long time and cannot put it down. At high levels over years, it does to your joints what sugar does to your cartilage. It breaks down the cushioning. It inflames the lining. It makes the pain louder. And most women our age, Helen said, are walking around with cortisol levels they have been carrying for decades without knowing it. I sat there and thought about what I had been carrying. The year my youngest son moved across the country and stopped calling as often. The long illness of my mother that I managed while raising children and working, and never once said to anyone, "I am not all right." The years I spent worried about money in a way I never told Robert the full shape of. The grief after he died, managed the way women of my generation were taught to manage grief, by organizing, by being useful, by not burdening anyone with the size of it. I had been carrying all of it, still. Helen did not tell me what to do. She asked me one question. She said, "Is there something you have been carrying that you have not yet put down?" I went home that night and sat in the kitchen long after the lights in the neighbors' houses had gone off. I wrote letters I did not send. I cried in a way I had not cried since the week Robert died. And something shifted that night. I cannot put the whole of it into words, but the direction changed. I called my son the next morning, not to tell him I was hurt, just to tell him I loved him and I missed him and I was proud of who he had become. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Mom, I have been meaning to call." We talked for 2 hours. My blood work, the numbers the doctor checks to see how much inflammation is in my body, came back different 6 months later. My rheumatologist asked what I had changed. I told her the food and something else. She wrote down the food. She nodded at the something else the way doctors nod at things they cannot put in a chart. But I could put it somewhere, in my knees, in my hips, in the way I walk down my own porch steps without holding the railing anymore, in the way Clara came to visit last spring and watched me walk across the yard and said, "Gran, you move different than you used to." I asked her different how. She said, "Like you're not bracing for something." She was right. I had been bracing for something for years. I did not know it until I stopped. Here is what I want to leave you with. Because you have stayed with me this long, and that means the world to me. The 7 foods and snacks are real. Give them up and you will feel the difference in this body. Not in months for most of them, in weeks. That is not something I read somewhere. It is what happened in this body, over 20 years of paying close attention. You may find it goes faster for you. You may find 1 or 2 are harder than the others. Be patient with yourself. The body does not undo years of inflammation in a weekend, but it does undo it if you stop giving it what hurts it. And the question Helen asked me, I am going to ask it to you now, because you deserve to have someone ask it. Is there something you have been carrying that you have not yet put down? You do not have to answer it out loud. Just sit with it today. Because the women I have known who made it to my age, with their bodies still working, still moving, still carrying them where they want to go, those women almost always say the same thing when you ask them what they know now that they did not know at 50. They say, I learned to put things down. The body you have right now is not the final answer. That is the thing I want you to hear more than anything else I have said today. The pain that feels permanent is not always permanent. I am 89 years old and I walked to my mailbox this morning in the October cold, and the only thing I felt was the cold. I love every one of you who has stayed with me all the way to the end. I mean that the way I would mean it to someone I have known my whole life. Drop your name and your age and the town you are watching from in the comments below. I read every one. I will see you next week.